This is not surprising when front page articles pop up in the media like this and turn people off the political process.
There's a growing cynicism, and I think it's still growing, about the effectiveness of our democracy. I think mostly because of the distance between the people and the politicians, that there's a concern, and a justified concern amongst electors, that the politicians, who are only up for election every 3 years or 4 years, aren't that concerned about the interests of the electors. They're more concerned, with following the directives of their party and ensuring they have the support of rich people and powerful media moguls, because they're very useful in winning elections, to have money and good press. So I think that's what's opened up a gap between the people and the politicians.
I think a bad moon is rising over democracy in our times, and you can see lots of threats to it, and you can see grumblings and some anxieties mounting about democracy. Look at the turnout rates in lots of democracies, the declining turnout rates, or look at it's the lowest party membership since the 1920s, and the slacking off of politicians.
We've got these groups who, used to speak for large numbers of people. Now they're they're just an in-house tight group of apparatchiks. Now, I don't think they're necessarily the best people to be running our society. I wish there was more public participation, but the transformation in our society is such that people say they haven't got time for it, they're too busy, or it's too boring. I don't want people to be turned off it too much, because then I think the system is in danger.
I wanted to find out who our representatives are and why they entered politics. And to do this, I chose to interview people from different political leanings and levels of government. I started with the Mayor of my local council, Dr. Peter McDonald, who also served as an independent for 8 years in the New South Wales Senate.
I think one of the genuine reasons for getting involved in politics is that you get offended by something or you get angry. And in fact, it originally started with my observation that people were getting sick who were swimming in the beaches in the Manly community because of pollution from the sewage disposal. So that was what triggered my sense of an injustice. So there was an injustice there, that the public authorities were spilling sewage onto a iconic beach, and not only was that inappropriate in terms of Australia's lovely coastline, but also the fact that some patients were getting sick. And I arranged a study with the Department of Health, and it showed beyond doubt that was the cause. I then started knocking on doors at government departments and said, do something about it, and realised that they weren't going to do anything. So that set the scene for getting involved. So I was a kind of, an accidental politician to that extent.
I then travelled to Canberra, the nation's capital, and interviewed the Labor representative for Fraser, the Honorary Bob McMullen, and Liberal ACT Senator Gary Humphries.
Well, I really got involved because of the war in Vietnam. I was of conscription age and therefore liable to be, and eventually was called up for service, and I was bitterly opposed to the war. I wasn't involved in any political party at the time, I just was opposed to the war, and a few friends of mine convinced me that if I wanted to stop the war I had to change the government, and the logic of that was pretty compelling. And so I had a few criticisms of the Labor Party at the time, but I joined because it was the only show that could stop the war.
Well, I was interested in politics at a very young age. When I was still a child, I decided I wanted to be in politics. I reckoned that was the way that people influenced the world in which they lived, and I wanted to, I suppose, be in control of the world that was around me, not in the sense of dominating other people, but influencing the circumstances impacting on my life. And so I planned a career in politics from a very young age. I studied courses at school that led me to a degree in law. I did law because that was the occupation which most frequently led to politics. And I was lucky that at the age of 30 I was elected to the Territory Parliament, the ACT Parliament, and the age of 44 elected to the Federal Parliament as a Senator for the ACT.
My final interview was with Greens candidate for Southport in Queensland, Carla Brandon.
Me, I suppose I grew up, really didn't know very much about politics or really how the country worked and who operated it and so forth. And I guess as I got older, I just started to take more of an interest because I felt so, I suppose especially when I started to vote at 18, I sort of would look at the paper and think, well, I wouldn't have a clue because I don't know who these people are, I don't know anything about them. You know, all I know is what I've heard from the telly and what my parents have told me. So basically I just either did donkey votes or then I suppose a few years later I decided I'd just vote for the Greens because I figured that they probably had their heart in the right place.
Carla also made a very important point about the lack of political information within the education system of Australia.
All I ever thought was that only two parties could win. You know, one of the two could win. And I guess once I found out, it's some sort of revelation that actually anyone can win, it's just a matter of people voting for them, then I thought, well, that's kind of amazing because how come I didn't know this? You know, I'm 18, 19, 20 years old and I don't know anything about my own political system. And I thought, well, I had to do English at school and yet I don't think it's something that I really needed in that much detail, and I couldn't figure out why then hadn't I done politics as a compulsory subject, because to me that seems so much more essential to know.